So 80% of adults want to write a book someday, but of the ones that even start their manuscript, only 3% actually get to the finish line and finish and publish their book. Now, I was really curious why that was, and in order to figure out the answer, I went to a guy who has published almost 60 books, many of which are bestsellers, a guy named Brian Tracy. He is an OG Tony Robbins, one of the legends in personal development, and I bought his course and I consumed it, devoured it, and it turns out there was a secret to getting books finished. There were a couple of techniques that guys like Brian Tracy use to crush books and to write multiple books every year easily, to finish them every time. And I want to share with you guys what those techniques are in this video series. So if you're one of those 80% of adults who wants to write a book, you can actually be part of that 3% that finish it, publish it, get it on Amazon, and you can pat yourself on the back and feel great that you got your message out of you and into the world. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I've self-published 2 books now, and the first one was this book. It's called Fire Yourself. It's about real estate investing. And prior to publishing this book, I spent hours and hours watching YouTube videos and reading blog posts about self-publishing, trying to figure the whole thing out, how to edit the manuscript, how to design a cover, how to format it, get it on Amazon. It took me so long to figure out all those technical details, and I nearly gave up many times. And the second book that I self-published is this one. It's called Nail Your Niche, about starting an online coaching business. And this book is twice as long as this one, but I wrote it in half as many hours and with at least half of the stress, if not less than that. And it was all because of some of the key stuff that I learned from Brian Tracy. In fact, for this book, I even did a Kindle version, a hardcover version, and I went and recorded an audiobook in a local studio here in Denver. So I got it in every single format as well. So in this video, I'm going to give you what I think is the top tip to make sure that you finish your book and get it published and have it done. You don't waste time writing it only to just let it sort of die on the vine. But before that, I want to say this. If you're someone who has a business and you want to write a book to help grow your business, then it will, okay? These books have made me over 200 grand in back-end revenue from people who read it, liked it, reached out to me, and joined one of my other programs or worked with me as a client one-on-one. And the reason why, and I don't know for sure if this is deserved or not, but people just really respect someone who has written a book. They realize that it takes a lot of work. My mom even brought this book to my own wedding and displayed it for everyone to see, which was kind of embarrassing, but she didn't print out any of my Facebook posts or my emails, but it was something about books, right? It's like when you write a book, people say, wow, congratulations, but they don't say that if you write a damn good Facebook post or an email. So writing a book will really legitimize you if you actually take it all the way to the finish line. But not only that, is it teaches your process comprehensively. So instead of having to say the same stuff over and over and over again, you can just be like, here you go. You want to start a coaching business? This is how. And it's this compact unit that works on its own. And I mean, these books probably make me a few $100s a month in income too, which is kind of like having a rental property or two. And it's royalty income, which means there's absolutely no work. Somebody buys it on Amazon, Amazon prints it and ships it and pays me $6 or $7. It's not a lot of money, but if you wrote a bunch of books, you really could have this grow to be a substantial source of revenue for you as well. So the number one tip that I'm going to give you in this video to help make sure that you finish your book that I learned from the guy who has written 60 best-selling books is to outline your book. And I know that sounds super basic, super simple, but allow me to elaborate why it matters. And I'm also going to share with you my outlining strategy, and I'll provide you a free template to use as well that's going to make this all make sense. So when I wrote both of these books, there was that inevitable point where I just felt completely overwhelmed, like, what am I even doing here? And what was I writing about? And which chapter was I on? And it's kind of like right when you're in the thick of it, that it just feels so overwhelming and you get kind of lost in your own book. And my opinion is that that is probably the point where a lot of people give up on it altogether. And so let me ask you this. Have you ever tried to paint a painting before, especially one on a blank canvas, where you're just staring at that blank canvas, you have no instruction whatsoever, and you're just trying to come up with something out of the blue? It's kind of intimidating and overwhelming, isn't it? Now, on the flip side, have you ever tried to paint by numbers before, where the painting comes with all the little spaces and there's a number inside of it, and you get the exact paint that matches that number and you fill it in? So when you use an outline for your book, this is the equivalent of painting a picture by the numbers. Essentially what you do is you write down all of the key points or the major themes that you want to communicate in your book, and then those are probably going to eventually become the chapters, but you don't need to come up with the name for them yet. You don't need to think this is chapter 8, this is chapter 3. You can and will need to reorganize those later, but you're just creating essentially buckets for ideas that you want to share in your book. So you might sit down and come up with 13 major topics that you want to communicate in your book. And all I do is I'll list them on a Google Doc, and then I will create a link, and then the link goes to a separate Google Doc where I actually start to write that chapter. And then when I sit down to write, I essentially look at my list of topics that I want to communicate in this book, and I pick the one that I feel the most inspired to talk about that day, and I work on it. And I even gamify the process. So out of all the different topics that I want to communicate in the book, I will color code them. Red being needs attention, meaning I've literally only created the label, but I haven't actually written anything yet. Or yellow will be that it's in process, but it needs more work. And then once I get something done or mostly done, I'll change that to green. I'll be like, okay, I've said pretty much everything I want to say about this point, so I'm going to label that one as green. So then this is essentially the equivalent of the paint by numbers style, where you sit down, you flip open your laptop, you see all the kind of working chapters that you have, or you want to call them topics if you want, and you get to look at what needs work and what is completed, and then choose where to chip away. So you're essentially creating your own blueprint for your book. When you have a proper outline and you've gamified it to where you can see the color codes and you can tell what needs attention and what's moving along well, and then you can sort of work with your inspiration about, oh, I want to talk about, the marketing stuff today, or I want to talk about the leadership section of my book today. Then you can go in and flesh that section out some, but not, get lost in the entire project, because books are massive projects, and, there's sections and chapters and introductions and conclusions, and, there's just so much to it that if you don't chunk it down to those manageable steps that you can take each day, then that is when the overwhelm and the confusion sets in. And that's why most people don't finish their book. And so when you create an outline and you really stick to it, then it's almost like a life raft that you can cling to throughout the process. It's like the one thing that makes sense, right? Because humans, we operate well with frameworks and with step-by-step instructions, inside of which we can be creative and free. So before you actually just sit down and start pounding out chapter 1 in your book, I recommend spending as much time as needed to outline your book. Just really think it through, end to end. What is everything I want to say in this book? And kind of break it up into, it's recommended to try to aim for, 10 or 12 or maybe no more than 21 chapters, so somewhere in that range of, let's say, 10 to 21. And that would be, what a chapter is in a nonfiction book, right? It's like the major breaking points. Like this one's going to be about mindset. This chapter is going to be about sales. This chapter is going to be about marketing, and so on, or whatever those are for your book. But if you can come up with those 10 to 21 major themes or topics that are probably ultimately going to become chapters, I'm just not using that word yet because I don't want to make you feel like you have to commit to your chapters, because you don't. But then when you come up with those themes or topics, then those are the headers underneath which you can spill your guts and just start to, unleash and say everything you want to say about that topic, then at the end, you can look back and say, oh, this marketing chapter really needs to move up to chapter 3, and this chapter needs to move down, and this one probably needs to be eliminated altogether. Now, before we hop off, I'm going to share one more tip that I think you guys are really going to love, especially if you're someone who hates writing, but you want to write a book and publish a book. So this is something that Brian Tracy actually does to write all of his books. Now, disclaimer, I have not tried this, but it is what he recommends doing. And it's how he claims to be so prolific with the output that he has writing multiple books every single year. So Brian recommends that you actually dictate your book. So that means you speak your book. You can get these things called a dictaphone, or you can just use a voice recorder. You can look it up on Amazon if you wonder what that is, but it's like this thing that looks like an old school cell phone, and you hit the record button and it records you. And you can send your recordings to a service like rev.com, or you can have a VA transcribe it for you. And then that can be your working draft. So let's say you're like, my book's gonna have 12 chapters, and then you can actually just say, all right, chapter 2 is marketing, and I'm just gonna pick up my recorder and hit record, and I'm just gonna say everything that I want to say about marketing, and I'm just going to spill it all out, and then I'm going to send it to someone to transcribe it. You can do it that way, and then once they transcribe it, you put it in your Google Doc, and there's still going to be a good amount of editing that you'll have to do to clean it up and make it, book worthy. You're not just going to write this like kind of stream of consciousness style. But Brian Tracy does say that when you dictate your book prior to transcribing it or editing it into written, it comes off as more conversational, which people like. So I hope that helped, guys. And if you want some more help self-publishing a book on Amazon, like one of these, so that you can share your message, change lives, and bring in multiple 6 figures in back-end revenue, then I have a program coming up that I'm launching in approximately 30 days, where I'm going to be taking a group of aspiring authors and helping them self-publish their first book on Amazon by the end of this year. Not only are you going to be on calls with me weekly to actually co-write the book during our calls and have me provide feedback and accountability for you to get all the writing done, but you're also going to be working with Ben Kelly, who is an independent self-publisher, and he's a top self-publishing expert. He is the one who designed this cover, for example, and helped me edit this book and made it beautiful and, formatted it in multiple formats, got a Kindle version, a hardcover version, helped me navigate the audiobook process a little bit. And he's on board. He did such a good job for me with this book that I had to bring him on board to help you guys as well. So you'll have 2 people in your corner ensuring that you not only get your book done and published by the end of this year, but you don't have to worry about all the technical details and the how do you get it on there and format it and stuff. But more importantly, the book will have multiple perspectives on it, so it will be sure to be a great book that makes waves in the market. So if you want to be added to the interest list for this program that's launching in about 30 days, I put a link in the description down below. Just enter your email and I'll notify you when that is live. And then also, if you're worried about whether your book is going to suck or if you're good enough at writing to actually make this happen, you're going to want to check out this video where I go over the one thing I learned from Brian Tracy again that makes sure that your book does not suck. And in fact, people say that book was super easy to read and it was awesome. So if you want to learn that, check that video out and I will see you there.